David Drucker is with the Dispatch. David, you watched last night. Kamala Harris had one choice to make in this campaign. One, pick a vice president candidate. We saw Tim Walz last night. How'd he do?
Well, he didn't have a very good night. So if you're grading him on debate points, on debate style, on command of the issues and the ability to argue points in a debate, he did not do well. And look, these things don't tend to matter all that much, but in a race of inches, every little bit helps, and sometimes things can hurt that don't normally hurt. So we'll see how it goes. I don't think that Walz disqualified himself, and that's the one thing you look for in a vice presidential debate. That's all that matters. You and I've talked about that. But Vance, I think, did a lot to, and this is important, I think, for the Trump campaign, did a lot to reverse what people think of him, his image, what kind of person he is. That could be very helpful to former President Trump.
I've been telling people on text all day. He did the Ohio State University proud last night, Yale Law School and the Marines as well, but he was unflappable, absolutely unflappable. And the key moment for me is that CBS was in the tank again. It was 3-on-1 again. And when Margaret Brennan attempted to cut him off after a fact check that was not supposed to happen, he wasn't having it, David. I think that was a very impressive moment, and the Frank Luntz focus group came out 12-2 in his favor. It started out 4-8 against him. What'd you make of the moderators in that moment?
Well, that was just let me say that I don't know if it was a mistake. I don't know if it was on purpose. It shouldn't have been done. It broke their own rules. And, in an interview, I find that perfectly acceptable. I do it in interviews.
Sure.
I did it in interviews last night in the spin room. In a debate, especially if you haven't laid it out as a part of the way the debate's going to work, you just don't do that. Margaret Brennan's a professional. I was really surprised at that. I will say that I found elements of the questions surprising, but other than that moment, I didn't find it to be a particularly troublesome debate. And I didn't.
No, here's the most troubling thing, David. I really want you to think about this. You guys at the Dispatch are serious. Sit down with Hayes and Jonah. ABC and CBS did 3 hours of debate. They did not ask one question about China. It's as though Xi Jinping is Voldemort. I believe they are compromised. Not that they're being run by China, but they're afraid of losing money and getting banned and being thrown out. Disney, of course, owns ABC. It is the most glaring thing in the world. Our superpower competitor enemy is China, and it did not come up in 6 hours of debates by our two major networks, both of which have interest in China. Is that a problem?
Well, look, I think it's a problem if you don't ask about the key issues, right? And I have this memory of China being raised during the presidential debate itself.
Tariffs were brought up, but not China. Tariffs on our part, but not China, not its ambition.
Well, listen, that's something that I'm interested in watching, and I think it should be asked. What surprised me last night was that, and I'm just saying surprised, that usually in these vice presidential debates, you get what would you do if you were all of a sudden the commander-in-chief question, right? There's usually some question about, in the unfortunate event that you end up in the top job, what do you do then in some fashion? And that wasn't raised. And so I will say, though, if you looked at the reaction from viewers, they felt like it was a substantive issues-based debate, and they liked the fact that the two candidates weren't screaming at each other or yelling at each other.
Oh, yeah.
Angry at each other.
That was fine. The candidates did great. The moderators did bad. David, we had 180 missiles fired at Israel yesterday. They spent 10 minutes on World War III's edge because I can't believe it. 10 minutes. What did you think it was going to go longer?
Well, I thought the foreign policy component, especially because Margaret Brennan was one of the moderators, would be more robust and substantial. I really did. And so that surprised me. But I do know as a journalist, you're trying to get to a number of different things in a format like this, and it can be very difficult. I've been on the receiving end of criticism. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you follow up here? Why don't you ask this question or that question? So if it sounds like I'm pulling my punches here, I am, because I just know how difficult this is. But as a viewer, and as somebody who's interested in how this impacts the campaign, more foreign policy would be good. But Hugh, every 4 years we have this complaint. I don't know if you and I together, but I have it
you
every
know, though,
4 years.
David, I've
Not
done
enough foreign
5 of these
policy.
debates. I've done 5 of them. If you stand your ground in the debate prep, you get to ask about the nuclear triad. You get to ask about TikTok. You just have to stand your ground when the interns and the associate producers all want to talk about abortion for the 10th time. I'm just amazed that we're talking about abortion and childcare.
Well, listen, abortion, you're going to have to talk about. Childcare, I could have done without.
I mean, what did we learn about abortion?
It doesn't matter.
Everybody knows Trump says.
Abortion is the reason right. The reason you talk about abortion rights is the reason you talk about immigration and inflation, and the reason you should talk about foreign policy, because it's something voters really care about. And so all of these other extraneous issues around the edges, you let go, but those belonged in there.
That might be the best defense, but you know what? The world worries about blowing up, and it started to blow up yesterday. 6 hours before the debate, we were watching missiles falling on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and we spent 10 minutes on it. They will never get up. They will never wash that steak off, David. But thank you, my friend, David M. Drucker on X and at the Dispatch. I'll be right back.